you've had a chance to settle down at home. So I would advise you to take a little notepad and so that you can write. Let me just open my video so that you can see me here. Just minimize that so that it does not interfere with my slides. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to help you on your journey to become an MCIPS, and the scope and influence of procurement and supply is one of these core modules that you need to make it through in order for you to be successful in your journey to become an MCIPS. So our aim really is to, I think highest priority at this stage is to help you pass your exams. However, we obviously realize that some of you have either been sponsored by your organizations or you are doing it self-sponsored or whichever way, which means that your knowledge should also increase. And so that is one of our other aims, to help you become a better employee and ultimately a better individual, because procurement affects us in everyday life. All right, so I'm ready to start, and we're going to start with chapter 1 of the scope and influence of procurement. If you need to ask a question, ladies and gentlemen, please raise your hand. And if it's it's a burning question, we've got a Q&A at the end, so I recommend that you keep all your questions until the end. But if it is a burning question, please raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity for you to ask your question. All right, so let's get started. The chapter 1 of L4M1 is about understanding and analyzing added value that can be achieved through procurement and supply chain management. All right. Now, all of you are here because in one way or another, you are either a procurement practitioner or you would like to pursue a career in procurement. And therefore, you need to be able to understand the value that procurement and supply chain management brings to the organization, okay? So that is one very important part. And besides, in your own career growth, when you are motivating for your promotion or you are arguing your case in a performance appraisal, you need to be able to arm yourself with the value that you brought to the table. We'll talk about all those technical terms. And I must tell you guys, ladies and gentlemen, that we are a profession. Procurement is a profession. So just like the doctors have got their own lingo where they speak about technical terms, engineers have got that, lawyers have got those technical terms, procurement as well has got technical terms. And from the onset, when you define terms that you have learned in your CIPS module, you need to define them according to procurement terms, which means our technical procurement terms. Okay, so you need to understand that. It's different for an ordinary person when they speak about a category. When you ask them to define what a category is, they'll say something else. But when it's procurement, you have to explain it in procurement terms. And as we go along this session, you'll be able to understand that. So let's kick it off, ladies and gentlemen, with the very first 1.1, describing the categories of spend that an organization may purchase. So I'm going to first start with laying the foundation by doing going through the definitions of some of the key terms that you'll meet in this chapter. The first one we're going to look at, obviously, is the word procurement, okay? So you need to understand that procurement is a strategic term. It is in itself, when it is set up in a business, it is a strategic function, okay, which involves very high-level skills, which you acquire through some learning that you are doing through CIPS. And procurement is wider than ordinary purchasing. When I started off in my career, in procurement, we were called purchasers, you know, and those days you would just get an item. The buyer, I mean, the engineers have gone and sourced who the supply is. They just come and give you an instruction for you to finalize the transaction, put the contract in place, and pay the supplier. But now we are called procurement because we are responsible for the whole process of obtaining goods or services in any way, including purchasing is part of procurement, hiring, leasing, and borrowing, all right? So procurement therefore embraces the whole wider process, and purchasing is only a component of it. The purchasing function is just the transaction of issuing out a purchase order, receiving the goods, and paying the supplier. All right, we'll see as we discuss later on the procurement cycle, what we are talking about. The procurement reflects a more proactive, strategic, relational, integrated approach that is used within an organization for the purpose of obtaining goods and services. All right. So the procurement processes begins by identifying a need and is complete once the goods or services that meet that need are delivered. I want you to keep this definition of procurement in mind, because later on we'll talk about the supply chain management, and then we will contrast the two so that you can see where procurement and supply chain management, how they relate with each other. Maybe just to preempt, supply chain management is the bigger umbrella, but I'll give you the details later. So let's carry on with a couple of more definitions. Some of these I've left out because there's more that we're going to talk about in a moment. So some of it also includes elements such as, that is, procurement added value. Okay, value add is an important element of procurement. What value are you adding? All right. Now, in value is the value of anything, you know, it's the worth of something. Okay, so if something is worth more, it is regarded to have higher value. And in procurement terms, when you add value, there are certain things that you do. Like I said, it is another procurement technical terms. You've heard people say, this person is not adding value and so on. Maybe you're not contributing to a conversation or something like that. But that's not what we're talking about here. And we explain in detail so that when you're asked, you can, with confidence, express yourself on what this means. So purchasing, we have already explained, its acquisition of supplies or inputs into the organization. Remember, when you put a long-term contract in place after a whole procurement process, the purchasing part of it is the point where a purchase order is released until the supplier is paid. That is where the purchasing ends. Procurement, on the other hand, starts way at the identification of the need and going through the process. We'll do the cycle in a little more minutes. So it looks about quality, cost, inventory, supply, which is the act of providing something or making it available. It talks about waste management and logistics, okay? Because all these are intertwined within the procurement process. Because until the item is, the supply is paid and the item is delivered to where it needs to be consumed, the procurement process is not complete. So purchasing and supply are therefore functions within procurement. So we've talked about purchasing. Now, supply is the act of making something available. And let's now go to the main introduction of this. So everything needs the sourcing and buying for an organization must involve procurement. All right. This means that the cost of an organization can be linked to procurement. If you were to look in your cost manual, they've done a comparison of bolting materials, versus things like services and human resources costs and overheads. In every organization, much of the the funds or the monies leaving an organization goes through a procurement transaction, all right? And it is estimated that even up sometimes between 60% to even 80% of money leaving an organization goes through a procurement transaction. And that is why in most countries today, you find that the procurement department is directly linked to the finance director, because if I am in charge of finances of an organization, then I want to be accountable for the department that is responsible for the largest amount of funds leaving the organization. You need to have a direct line of sight over that. So a cost within an organization is an amount payable in return for receiving something. Okay. Sometimes costs may also be made up of time, materials, effort, and opportunities. All right. Malika, you got your hand up. Would you want to say something? Hi, Malika. All right, let's carry on. Okay, cool. The next one, we're going to look at other terms that are related to the material costs of an organization. Within an organization, some costs may be made up of the following. You'll have fixed costs, variable costs, and direct costs, which we are going to talk about. Fixed costs normally are those costs which do not change with output of the organization. And in here, we are talking about things like usually the overheads. When you talk about variable costs, the cost of raw materials, the cost of raw materials that are supposed to be incorporated in the finished goods are part of variable costs because they change with the quantity of production. But the number of directors remains the same. And usually in most organizations, the amount of electricity used usually is the same unless there is additional equipment or capacity that has been added on, but they are usually regarded as fixed costs. So you need to understand whenever you are doing a cost analysis for the products that you are purchasing in the organization. All right, so a few of those definitions, and now we are going to look at the different categories that you procure within procurement and supply chain management function. Remember that all these categories, you need to know how to define them, and this is what we're going to be talking about. All right, so let's look at the categories that we procure. I have here 4 of the main groupings of categories that are available for procurement in any organization. The very first one is stock and non-stock procurement, okay? So this is one big category. In fact, you can split the two separately because sometimes you'll see that when you define them, they are different between themselves, but you can contrast them between each other. So the first category of spend that a procurement department procures is stock and non-stock procurements. Then we have direct and indirect procurements, all right? Then we have a capital and operational procurement. Okay, and then finally, we have services. So these are the ones that we want to concentrate on for the purpose of our revision today. So let's start with stock procurement. Now, stock procurement is all the listed inventory that you have. Now, you don't have to get confused about this. Stock and inventory are interchangeable words. You can either say that you are keeping stock in your warehouse or you are keeping inventory in your warehouse. The two of them the two words are interchangeable, all right? Now, stock procurements are those items, goods, components, which are raw materials, components of finished goods, which are held in the warehouse, or they're kept in the organization for later use, okay? Now, it is important for you to understand that the stock procurement consists of raw materials. Now, raw materials are items that are extracted from their natural source by a primary organization or by the primary sector. These would include, and remember guys, as we talk about these definitions, you should be able to have some of these examples in your mind, all right? So stock procurement, the first one is raw materials. It could be iron ore. If you are in the steel industry and you transform iron ore into steel by combination of the iron ore and the other elements, and you bring out steel, you will keep iron ore as stock in your inventory. If you are in an organization that is in the manufacturing sector, you will buy components, okay? You will buy components, and those components, you will keep them in your warehouse, in the stores, and those will be issued out to production. Then you also keep finished goods. Now, finished goods are basically stocked by a retail store to sell to consumers. All these are regarded as stock. When you go to a retail outlet in South Africa, we've got, and I think most of the world today has got ShopRite. In fact, most of Africa today has got ShopRite. So it is probably an example that I can use, which you can all relate to. All the items that are on the shelves, which are finished goods, are regarded as stock for those organizations. That's why you find when they need to count all those, they say they are closed for stock taking, because they're counting all the items that they've got in their in the storages and in the shelves. All right. Then you have maybe just as a comment, you need to understand the distinctions between the manufacturing sector. And as we talk about this, I'd like you to always keep in mind what are some of the activities a buyer would get involved in, a procurement practitioner like you would get involved in, which are unique to these environments. The extraction industry, those of you who work in the mines, the way that you do procurement is different from the way a buyer in the manufacturing, for example, automotive industry would do procurement. And considerations, for example, of quality and conformance and issuing out of specifications in the retail sector is going to be different for a buyer in the retail sector than the buyer in the manufacturing sector, okay? So try to keep those in mind as we talk about these items. There's the statement I've written here is that the stock must be managed carefully to balance between these two things, cost and continuity of supply. All right. One of the things that stock always brings about is the cost or capital costs, which is the cost of holding inventory. And how that one comes about is because when you draw money from the bank to go and buy and pay for items that you are keeping on the shop floor for assembly later, that money, if kept in the bank, could have been earning interest at a particular interest rate. So you are actually incurring, in fact, you are losing out by keeping too much stock on the shop floor, or you could have used it in another opportunity where money can generate money faster. But at the same time, we have to keep stock on the shop floor because you don't want to be disrupted in your production, because any kind of stoppage because you have run out of spare parts, you didn't keep a proper spare parts in the shop, or you bought too few raw materials to convert into finished goods, that is going to be a disaster for a manufacturing organization. So ladies and gentlemen, you need to be able to do that striking balance, all right? So let's move fast. Then you've got non-stock. Non-stock is the opposite of stock. Obviously, this one comes to the line as just in time when it is required, okay? I've included the concept of just in sequence, which is normally used within the automotive industry, where there's color coding of cars and they have to come in sequence as the parts like the doors and bumpers must come in sequence as they come for assembly to the line. Then you've got the next one, which is the direct procurement. Now, you might be a direct procurement buyer, and what that means is that you source materials that are directly related to a specific job, okay? Those materials are directly related to a specific job or to a particular product. And these procurements are integral to an organization. Without them, there can be no finished products for the consumer to buy. For example, bricks, all these are direct procurements. All the items that you use for the finished product that you sell to an end customer, all procurements related to that is called direct procurement. On the other hand, indirect procurement is all kinds of procurements that are for the day-to-day running, for the support staff, rentals and mobile phones and so on, which is not core. Now, we use the Krelchik matrix, ladies and gentlemen, especially when we are trying to identify the strategic nature of direct procurement and indirect procurement. We use what is called the Krelchik matrix. Now, the Krelchik matrix is basically it's a matrix that I don't like using the same way to explain the other word. The Krelchik matrix really is it contains quadrants that has high risk on the horizontal axis and high importance to the organization in the vertical axis. And depending on whether an item is of high risk, in fact, the complexity of supply is very high. And then if it's extremely important to the organization in terms of the item being a high income generator or critical for operations, then it becomes a strategic item. And you have to classify most direct procurements as strategic and they're leverage, and then indirect procurements are leverage and routine. Jacob, Job, that's your name. I see your hand. I'll give you an opportunity. Okay, let's just quickly look at capital purchases, which are also known as CapEx. All right. Now, the way you distinguish capital purchases is that items that are procured to make money, to keep the business running, market trends, and so on, machinery and things, those are capital expenditures, okay? So on the other hand, operational expenditures are for ongoing expenses like rentals and so on. So that is the key distinction between the two. Capital expenditure is spending money to make money, and it is normally for enlarging the business, expanding your organization, and so on. All right. The last one we're going to talk about is services procurement. Now, services procurement is procurement for intangible items. And you know that a service is intangible and it is different from goods because a service cannot be owned. You know, you cannot have a transfer of ownership on a service. So it includes things like cleanings, insurance, and so on and so forth. All right, let me ask Job. Job, you had a question before I proceed? You can unmute yourself, Job, and ask. All right. Job is not saying anything. You should raise your hand again, Job, if you would like to talk. I'm open to answer your question. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, those are the categories that you need to remember, okay? Understand that you go through stock and non-stock procurement, one category, okay? The next basket of categories is direct or indirect procurement. The next category is CAPEX or OPEX, or capital expenditure or operational expenditure. And the last one that I've shared with you is the services category. All right, understand those and know the intricacies of how it is, what is required for you to contract as a procurement practitioner when you are procuring services and so on. Let's quickly go. We're going to run again for another 10 minutes, and then I will open it up for questions and answers. Let's look at the sources of added value. Now, this is important. Added value, when you come across the question of value add in procurement or in CIPS, especially when you are dealing with the exam, the easiest level or the easiest thing that you should think about are the 5 rights of procurement, all right? Procurement and supply chain adds value mainly through these 5 rights of procurement. We add value through the 5 rights of procurement. So a balance of these, ensuring that we get the product in at the right quantity, right quality, time, place, and price are critical for us to ensure that we have a balance of these in every product that we get. So procurement adds value principally through the 5 rights of procurement. There are others that I will share with you later on added value. These are just some of them, but when you talk about added value in principle, in fact, I'll call it as a basis of our contribution to the organization. We add value by getting the right quantities, by getting the right qualities, by bringing the items to the organization on time, and bringing it to the right place. Believe you me, guys, I have seen things over my procurement life where people have delivered items to the wrong place. And it did not help because the buyer did not specify the right place to which an item should be taken to. That's why it becomes important. The right price. Pricing becomes one of the most talked about because obviously many organizations today are surviving, especially if you work for the private sector. Private sector's main reason for existence is to make a profit, because without a profit, they will not survive. And so procurement will add value by ensuring that they get the right price so that they do not pay too much for bought-in materials. And this is why our value add becomes highly, highly important. If you've been in procurement long enough, you probably have a savings target. You should have a savings target. Why? Because we are the custodian of pricing information in the organization. Okay, let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. So let's look at these 5 rights. Number 1, the price. The factors that can affect price are obviously quality, quantity, urgency of requirement, and so on. Remember, when you plan early, you will avoid excessive price on a product. There was a question, I'm not sure if it's on this forum, of a procurement practitioner who forgot that his contract was coming to an end, and the person who reminded him was a supplier who came with a price increase. Meanwhile, the contract expired a week before. I think it's not on this one. But ladies and gentlemen, that is a breakdown in controls with procurement, because as procurement, one of the things that we are good at is planning. Procurement practitioners are excellent planners, and that is who you are. All right. The right quality, Now, suppliers must comply to the relevant quality standards, and it is your responsibility to ensure that they comply to the ISO standards, the quality management systems, the ISO 14000, which the environmental management, and so on. So buyers must aim to achieve value for money and consider the cost implications for quality that is too low or too high. Okay. So value for money, ladies and gentlemen, is a delicate balance between pricing, quality, and all those 5 rights. You have to strike a balance. For example, you cannot, if you have to have an item flown in from overseas by a chartered aircraft, you might get it on time, but it will come at a cost that you will not afford. That is why planning becomes essential. When you know a contract is coming to an end and you're procuring items from overseas, plan in advance and allow that item to come in by the lowest and most safest means of transport possible. Make use of the ship, The right quantity refers to economies of scale, all right? Now, economies of scale is a simple term that just says that you need to make use of all the demand from within the organization before you go out on a procurement transaction. So if the HR division is looking for stationery, it is your responsibility as procurement to go to the manufacturing department, you go to finance department and say, I've got a requirement from human resources for stationery. Do you, Mr. Manager for Finance, have any similar requirements so that we can bundle the volumes together so that we can have economies of scale? The more value you have, in fact, the more quantities you have, the lower your pricing becomes. So the right quantity becomes essential for that, including the quantities that you hold in inventory. Remember, you have to strike a balance between those 2 things I told you about: the cost of holding inventory and the continuity of supply. You do not want disruptions in the production line. At the same time, you do not want to hold too much capital held in inventory, some of which might even deteriorate, okay? The right time, for the example, during warehouse open hours and on the right day, bring it at the right time, and then the right place, deliver it to the correct address. Now, let's look at some of these parts of the value added. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, procurement adds value principally by the 5 rights, okay? You will do well if you remember that. And now we dived into each one of them. Let's look at one of the most common value add opportunities for us, which is the price. Now, procurement, in the past, you know that there was only consideration of price. If you got the best price that came in, you were given a pat on the shoulders. Later on, we moved over to the total cost of ownership, okay? That was basically about the price and all the other things. Now, CIPS has added a second leg to it. You must also consider the total cost of acquisition and the total cost of ownership. These 2 are distinct. Although the total cost of ownership, the total cost of acquisition becomes a subset of the total cost of ownership, you need to consider the total cost of acquisition at the very beginning as well. It includes the purchase price, the quality of the product, the cost of coverage and insurance, okay, and the lead time. That is the initial cost of acquisition that you pay. You need to remember that those distinct levels of pricing. Then you come to the total cost of ownership, which is the cost of holding a product over a lifetime, not lifetime of a human, over the life of the project, all right? Often used when procuring assets rather than regularly sourced items. Let me just check on time and see how we're doing. Okay. Sources of added value in procurement and supply. with external suppliers. Some of these, I'm going to brush over them quite fast because my time is, I need to bring to a time when I engage with you with questions and answers. When you add value with external suppliers, guys, make sure that you have contracts in place, service level agreements. Now, a contract must be a legally binding contract, okay, which is, and you need to understand different, there's a general guideline that we have in South Africa, which has been given, in fact, let me not say South Africa, by CIPS that all of us subscribe to, okay? But you need to understand the legalities of contracts in every jurisdiction, because you guys are coming from everywhere in Africa, from different parts of different countries. You need to have a principal understanding of what constitutes a legally binding agreement when you enter in. Then you add value, because when you have that one solid, then your organization cannot be sued for a poorly constructed contract. Okay, so you add value by ensuring that you have properly legally binding agreements drawn up, depending on your jurisdiction, whichever place you are in your country. Now, English law is part of our common law. So we find in South Africa that most of the clauses, everything, in fact, everything that CIPS talks about in the contracting module is applicable to South Africa, unless it has been changed by a legislative document or act, but most of it is applicable to South Africa. Okay. Key performance indicators may be included in the contract. And remember, they are the quantitative and qualitative key performance indicators. You add value by doing that. Other non-monetary sources of added value, which you can include the brand issues, extra features, convenience, innovation, and sustainability. I'm going fast now. I want to tell you what added value is. Here we go. Now, value for money, okay, is the best outcome obtained for goods or services when various factors such as the 5 rights. Remember, again, every time you talk about value, think 5 rights. And also when you talk about value for money, there is innovation. Now, here's an exam clue. CIPS could ask you, what are some of the innovative ideas you would do as procurement to ensure value for money? All right, so you need to understand what some of those innovative ideas, they are in your books. Okay, go there and be sure that you underline them and read them. Suppliers who offer value for money are the ones that you must consider to win the business. I'm at 1.3 and I've got 2 more to go before my time. We are supposed to go to the next one for questions and answers. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any question that you have for what so far for what we have done? You can just unmute yourself and ask quickly before I proceed. Is everybody okay? Ladies and gentlemen, are you there with me? Give me a thumbs up or say something. Or all right. Yes, who raised hand? Butele is he? What was that name? I didn't see that. Sorry. Go for it, man. If I saw your hand raised, but it disappeared. I'm trying to maximize my screen so that I don't have all these things disturbing my screen. Go for it. I can hear you. Okay, you're okay, Mr. Buthelezi. That's fine. Good stuff. Okay, let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're benefiting. Please be sure that you've got a notepad. The slides are available for you, and you know that, as Asari has said, these sessions are going to be available. You can listen to them over and over and over again. So compare the concepts of procurement and supply chain. Now, I told you to keep in mind the definition of procurement. Now I will show you just in one slide. We're going to go faster now. We're going to go faster. I'll show you how procurement, and there's no better way. I found it easier to show you through a picture. Now, we know that first let's go through what supply chain is. Let's unpack what supply chain management is, okay? And we'll talk about what a supply network is. Because, you know, oftentimes we've got these buzzwords, big words, supply chain management. Where do you work? I work in procurement and supply chain management. And oftentimes people have no clue what that is. Here we go. So to start with, the supply chain, or part of it, is a network of individual organizations. Think of supply chain as interlinking, intertwined chains, okay? Each in the chain, you've got linkages. Now, in a physical chain, those linkages are made of steel or whatever metal they are. In a supply chain, those linkages are individuals and organizations, including technologies and activities and resources. And their purpose is for the transmission of goods and information from one place to another. So when you think about supply chain, think about a network of organizations, individuals, and activities that, as long as they've got something to do with the flow of goods and services from one point to another, the flow of information, they become a chain, a supply chain. Now, supply chain management, therefore, is the management of relationships within those chains. Okay, so when you are in supply chain management, what you are basically doing is you are managing the relationships and interlinks between those chains so that those chains continue to be solid, there is no misunderstanding, and there is continuous flow. There is no blockage. Okay. Now, when we come to supply networks, now supply network are multiple supply chains that network in a commercial environment, and they cross-link organizational structures. When you have a supply network of external suppliers, you'll have external suppliers who are forming a network on their own, and then they link to this big network that comes eventually and brings items into your organization. Then you have the manufacturers, distributors, and all these, each one of them have got a network or a supply chain network. All right. I hope you understand that, ladies and gentlemen. Great. Now, let me go to the next slide. Sorry, did we go back? What happened here? Okay, cool. We are now doing the comparison. Now look at this picture, ladies and gentlemen. I found it on the CIPS website. I acknowledge the source, so I'm cool. This is the best way I see to explain the difference between procurement. If you see where my mouse is moving over, procurement basically involves the bringing in of raw materials from external suppliers. They go through inbound logistics. Inbound logistics is every logistical initiative, flow of goods into the organization. Okay, you see a ship there. We're assuming that these guys buy their items from overseas, and then they are worked on, or they are, goods in warehouse, and then manufacturing. When items are brought in here and the supplier is paid, the work of procurement ends. Then from the moment when manufacturing takes over, they start manufacturing those items within your company, and they make them and they put them in a truck to deliver to customers. We are in the outbound logistics. And that outbound logistics goes to the customer. The customer goes to your retail shop, they buy what they are looking for, and off they go. The whole thing, ladies and gentlemen, is supply chain management. When you are called procurement and supply chain management, it means that you have the line of sight from where materials are coming from. You can see here, there is a picture of wheat. You can see that little thing, and then you see a tractor. You can even, for all I care, you can put a mine there. So here is the news, ladies and gentlemen. You procurement practitioners are responsible to ensure that the integrity of the whole supply chain is maintained. If you cannot, what's the word? You cannot recuse yourself of responsibility from your, if there is, for example, a supply chain network with your supplier, which goes down here, and there's a suppliers, he gets his raw materials from a mine that uses child labor. You cannot come and excuse yourself that I did not know, Mr. Procurement Practitioner sitting here in the manufacturing company. It is your responsibility to ensure the integrity of your whole supply chain as procurement. I hope you do understand that loud and clear. Okay, now another concept to understand is all the flow of information, the flow of products from the raw materials up to the end customer is called the downward stream. The upward stream is, this is the natural flow, because most of the things flow downwards towards, that's why it's called downward. The opposite direction is for the demand. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What are some of the benefits of supply SCM approach? It reduces cost, improves responsiveness, accesses to complementary resources and capabilities. Sorry, guys, we're running out of time, but we'll catch up. Don't worry, okay? We're going to catch up with some of the lessons. They're not as long as this one. Okay. And these are some of the supply chains that I was telling you about. You can have suppliers tiered at different levels. Please, you might be sitting in the buying organization, the original equipment manufacturer, OEM, original equipment manufacturer, but you must have direct line of sight right to the lowest level of tiers, okay? Now, let's talk about these others. Let me see, how do I remove this thing now? Come on, get out. Okay. All right, it's fine. Let's look at the other definitions about logistics. Logistics basically is a control of flow of goods or services between 2 points. Internal logistics is what happens within the organization, all right? And external logistics is what happens outside the organization, the distribution and retailing. Demand planning, on the other hand, is about what is knowing what is required and when. You know what fleet management is? It's about managing physical transport. Then materials management covers the handling, storage, inspection, and so on of finished goods. All right. Okay, then we are going to look at the Mrp system. Material requirement planning is an electronic system which can schedule orders, monitor inventory, and manage the production process. An Mrp system has 3 main objectives. It ensures that the parts of materials, all materials needed for manufacturing and end products are available. Ladies and gentlemen, here is how easier it's easier for me to remember this. You see, the Mrp system is a system that is used to predict the demand for products, okay? Now, it uses a bill of materials, and Mrp systems are dependent on what you put in. A lot of companies today don't use them. They may have it in their enterprise resource planning tools, but they may not use it because they do not have the levels of accuracy that is required for them to learn, to input into their Mrp system, okay? 1.4, differentiating the stakeholders that procurement and supply chain function may have. Oh, tongue twister here. I'm going to skip this and I'm going to go to questions and answers because we are running out of time. Okay, let's do it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just check what question we have. What is indirect procurement? Okay, that's the first question we have. What is indirect procurement? Now, indirect procurement. Now, I hope you've got a pen and a paper where you can write this. Indirect procurement is procurement for all secondary functions of an organization, or procurement for non-core activities for an organization. So when an organization it's got core activities, for example, let's take the automotive industry. It's easier to give them as an example. They manufacture cars. So all the wheels and tires and the bumpers that you buy for the manufacturing industry to go and have them assembled in the automotive company, those are direct procurement. Now, indirect procurement would talk about all the procurement you do for the building that you are staying in, the payment for the lights, the buying, even for you, the procurement organization, if you are a support function, whatever you consume in the organization, somebody buys it for you. It is indirect procurement. The next question is, what categories do indirect procurement officers specialize in? You are normally a generalist when you are doing indirect procurement. You do all the cleaning, all the securities, you do all the support kind of functions, okay? All right, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much. Let's see if there is any other. Okay, no others. I'm going to the chat group and see. In the exam, do we have to list the 5 rights of procurement as they are in that order or in any particular order? No, you don't have to list them according to the order in which they appear. You can list them whichever way that you want. And my advice is the ones that you remember thoroughly well, list them first and hit them hard. And then you can, the ones that you seem to be struggling to remember the details about, make sure they are last, okay? Is there any other question? Somebody trying to talk? Okay, let's see. There's another. What is the added value of total cost of ownership? All right. Now, remember, here is where you start explaining these things and understanding. You know, when you start building your understanding about these concepts, remember that when we talk about added value, we are trying to increase the worth of something. It's like somebody is talking in my ears. Okay, they have just muted. That's fine. Now, when you talk about added value, ladies and gentlemen, you are talking about the worth, increasing the worth of a product. Now, total cost of ownership is a concept of pricing. When you consider the price of an item, you look at the total cost of ownership. So when you relate it to added value, you say that you get the best total cost of ownership for a product that you are procuring. That is how you add value to a product, by improving its total cost of ownership. Okay. And then the next question is, where can we get the slides when you are done? The slides will be available to you both on YouTube, and we'll send them to you. I think we'll send them to CIPS, and CIPS will be able to distribute them to you. Should you have a question, okay, that's CIPS saying slides will be emailed. Excellent. Good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I think let's get started again with the next one. I'm going to jump to chapter 2 for the sake of time. Yes. Raised hands. kindly elaborate more on materials management, the process involved. Okay. Materials, you see, materials management is a culmination of all the activities involved for the management of the way it is said, the management of all the materials. Let me just go back. It covers, when you deal with materials management, you are dealing with the concept of handling all types of materials, storage, inspecting. It is almost like, you know, the way we defined supply chain management. Supply chain management is the management of supply chain relationships. Materials management is the management of materials. So what that means is wherever materials are found found in transit. They are found in storage. They're found in inspection. They're found in issuing and all that. The whole concept of ensuring that materials are kept in a way that is usable is the concept of materials management. Okay. All right. You are welcome. Okay, let's get started, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to chapter number 2. And chapter number 2. Okay, no, before I go there, would you like to, any one of you, if you are okay, I'm not sure if it's going to be chaos if all of you unmute, but I wanted us to discuss this particular question here. Describe 5 distinctive features of capital expenditure. Do you guys mind unmuting and then we can talk? If you would like to unmute, please, I don't mind you unmuting. Let me just see, there's another question. If they ask, how can I add value in my company? Do I need to cover 5 rights only, or should I go as far as mentioning other sources such as social? Lucky, remember that total cost of acquisition is part of the 5 rights. It is under the component of price. Okay, when you look at price, you look at the total cost of ownership, you look at the total cost of acquisition. So the 5 rights are the most basic way that procurement adds value in the organization. All right. And most organizations today want you to know how you can reduce prices. Okay. Every procurement practitioner, in fact, cascaded from the chief procurement officer, every CPO has got a target to save costs. They've got 5% or 10% or whatever, and that is cascaded to you as a buyer or a procurement practitioner. So the way you add value is you do these things at the right time, at the right place, and so on. You will see as we go further that you can extend your explanation to other things because you are the custodian of the procurement process. So you understand, if you are working in the public sector, you must know what government legislation is for procurement. You need to be able to advise the business that they can or cannot do certain things because it may or may not be allowed. All right. Let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Q&A, there's another question. So kindly elaborate, been answered live. Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if you have unmuted, so I'm trying to check if my headphones are working. Okay, please just say something, somebody to let's show me that I'm okay.
Can you? Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, Dirk. I can hear you. Now, I was wanting to discuss this. If you are courageous enough, we can have a conversation now. Unmute yourself, and let's talk about the 5 distinctive features. And I want to show you how to approach a typical exam question that would come. All right. We are preparing you for exams in July. And our expectation is that you will all get distinctions so that we can see you in the advanced course. Okay, so 5 distinctive features of capital expenditure. And believe it or not, guys, when this type of question, I've seen it in the past come, these days we don't have question papers, but those days they would load all the question papers. I don't know why, but anyway, they would load all the question papers on the system, and but they are no longer available. Okay, so if a question like this would come, it was counted for 25 marks. There is a chart here. Let me see what we're saying. What Job has muted. Did you answer question in Q&A? Job has unmuted, and one other. Yes. Did you answer question? Oh yeah, no, we are still in Q&A. Okay, let's carry on. Yes, this one I sorted it out. Describe 5 distinctive features of capital expenditure. So carrying 25 marks. What would you be? Firstly, does anybody want to tell me what is the command word on this question?
Describe.
It is describe. Yes, well done. Thank you. It is describe. And let's carry on. What does describe mean? It means give a full account of something. Now, a 25-mark question, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you write about, and okay, let me just say, if I assume that you write about 10 words on a line of an A4 paper, a 25-mark question should be able, you should be able to cover about 4 full A4 pages. 4 full A4 pages. I've written quite a number of exams in my life, and one of the things that I do is when I don't want to write any exams anymore anyway, but those days when I used to, I would stay until the last minute, even if I've finished, I would go through my transcript and ensure that everything I'm doing is right. And this is my first advice to you, ladies and gentlemen. You are not proving a point to the invigilator to show them that you can step out of the exam 15 minutes before. So sit there and write everything that you are required to do. I'm not saying you should waffle, because you won't be given marks for waffling. And if they ask you for 5, what have you been asked to do? You describe 5 things. What happens if you write more than 5? What happens? Do you know what would happen? And I've seen some of our students at the college, they are so enthusiastic. They want to give you, they want to give it to you. They want to write 6 or 7 things. You asked for 5, they give you 7. Now, what the examiner will do is that they will mark the first 5 that you have written. Okay? But if you, and that's why I say to you guys, make sure that your best things that you know well, you write them at the beginning. These are some of the exam tips I'm sharing with you. Okay, so if you write more than 5, you should be able to, they'll only mark the first 5. Very good, George. That's correct. Thank you. The first 5 will be marked, so don't waste time writing more than 5. What type of an answer is this? Now, there are 2 main types of answers in the final exams in CIPS, okay? If you've got a paper, write this down. Number 1, it's essay type answers. Number 2, it is list type answers, okay? So essay type answers. Now, everywhere, unless CIPS specifically asks you and they say, list the 5 things, then you can start putting numbers and bullets and things like that. But when they ask you to describe 5, they are expecting you to write an essay. The essay, so the essay, you guys have been through grade 7, where we learned about essays. An essay starts with an introduction. It starts with an introduction. So you do an introductory paragraph, providing a brief description and a definition and overview of capital expenditure in general. And then you go to the body. The body will have 5 paragraphs, each of them giving describing a feature of capital expenditure. And then you will need to provide, in every paragraph, remember to provide relevant examples. Sometimes questions would come like this with a what do you call that? A case study, with a case study. So if the question like this comes from a case study, be sure to link all your answers to the case study. Okay, it's Q&A, so please feel free. All right, this is George still saying they only give you 5. So provide examples such as buildings, machinery, all these are parts of capital expenditure. And finally, you do a conclusion and nail it. Then you know that you got your 25 marks. I don't know if you'll be generous enough to give you 25, ladies and gentlemen, but if you do it like this, you'll be able to pass. What I've done as well is I've given you the 5 paragraphs that you can. In fact, I've given you more than 5 features of capital expenditure, which you can utilize. Okay, next question. Outline 3 ways in which supplier selection can add value to the sourcing process. The command word is outline. All right. What are you required to do based on the command word? What does outline mean? It means you give the main features, facts, all the general meaning of something, omitting minor details. All right. And what type of a question is this? What type of an answer are they expecting? Again, it is an essay. Remember, introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Did you want to say something? I heard somebody says speak. Or you agreeing with me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then what would you include in the 3 ways? Okay, they're asking us 3 ways in which supply selection may add value. Number 1, poor supply selection poor suppliers are eliminated. Through that, then you add value by eliminating poor suppliers. It can help to ensure that procurement decisions are based on cost and value for money, criteria, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's go to chapter 2. Are you ready for chapter 2, ladies and gentlemen? Let's get started. Now, chapter 2 is talking about the key steps when procuring goods or services. What are the key steps? This is where we learn about the procurement cycle. Okay, it's a long process, but we'll catch up somewhere, somewhere. Let's start with the key aspects of the cycle. Here is the CIPS procurement cycle. Now, this cycle is a CIPS procurement cycle. There are other cycles out there, but you guys are CIPS professionals and members of CIPS. So we teach you the CIPS model. And here it goes. Number 1, identification and understanding the need. This is where it all begins. And remember, keep in mind the concept of procurement, purchasing, and supply chain management. So if you are in purchasing, you don't even get involved at identifying and understanding needs. Okay, those days, like I told you, when I started in my procurement journey, I was a purchaser. Okay, and I was not involved. The engineers would go identify the need and they figure out, they would just come and tell you, go and buy this item. They even give it a label, you know. So you have very little leeway to test the market and, you know, to do other things. But early involvement of buyer starts at the point where the need is identified. Then you go to the market options here. Now, by the way, at identification of need, it is at this stage where you will, in fact, prepare a requisition that details what is required. And I always prefer that a specification is drawn at this stage by whoever the owner of the end user is, like we call them in procurement. Then you go to market options. Here, the buyer determines whether the organization should make or buy to meet the demand, or they research suitable suppliers if the need is to be bought. Then you go to develop a strategy. Now you do a document which outlines whether to approach local, national, or global suppliers. I don't know how many of you are in the public sector, but if you are, a strategy like this would need to be approved by a certain level of delegated authority, okay? I know that most states or most countries around Africa, public procurement is highly regulated. So when you do this strategy, you take it for approval, and that is where you include the evaluation criteria in the strategy. Please just see if you can mute yourself. I think you're shuffling with your papers. And okay, thank you. Then the next one is pre-procurement market testing. Now, what happens here is you engage with the market to establish how best to develop the specification. Now, caution to the wind. It is acceptable in most private sector organizations, but it may not be acceptable in the public sector organization. This is where the technical team and the buyers, the procurement practitioners, they will get budget quotes and things like that to check whether they are in line. Usually, most public sector buyers, they frown at this pre-market engagement. So remember, the whole cycle has got 13 steps, and you don't have to, it's a generic cycle, you don't have to go through all those 13 steps. But for purpose of examinations, ladies and gentlemen, you should know them, okay? But you must understand how your policies are structured so that you don't get yourself into trouble. But it is a step that you can do. Then we do the pre-market, yeah, sorry, I repeated these two. Under the pre-market search, this is where the last bullet point, in fact, is what I wanted to draw the parallel to, because it's at this stage you check whether the time is right to act upon the need, and you consider the product life cycles and seasonal trends. All right. Now, you need to understand the maturity product life cycle of the product that you want to buy as a buyer. And they go through this curve, which shows that products, when they're introduced in the market, come in with very low sales and very high cost per customer. If you were to enter the market and procure the item at the introductory phase, guess what? You are going to pay an arm and a leg. So as a buyer, you need to be wise enough to know that this item is in maturity level. The costs are low per customer. You can enter the market. There are competitors that have come in. A number of competitors have come in, and you know, you can have options where to buy this item from. Okay, so understand the maturity levels of the product that you want to buy. Then you develop appropriate documentation to send out to potential suppliers. All right. Now, the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is the difference between the invitation to tender and the RFQ, the ITT and the RFQ in your own organization? How have you differentiated between these two? Anybody wants to share?
Yes.
Yes, Job, go for it.
I think, well, when we speak about the invitation, this is just like a call. It's actually a call just to inform you to actually submit. I mean, it's just a call to invite you. While the request for quotation, you already thrown up your whole bid, what do you call it? Bidders list. So here you actually inviting already somebody to submit a quotation, but the other one is just a call.
All
I don't know
right.
if it's more clear.
Yeah, it's clear what you have said. Now, I will teach you the CIPS way. Thank you, Job, for that.
All right, sir.
Sorry. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. I was trying to order some tea so that I can sort out my throat. Okay, cool. Job, well done for that. There is somebody called Evangelista who raised their hand. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to say something. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I think based on my experience, the invitation to tender, firstly, it depends on what an amount that is at stake. And then secondly, it depends on the services that must be provided if we can tender. But a request for quotation, it's for a certain amount. Maybe it might be for 1 million or below, or it might be something that it's a once-off that we just buy in a once-off. But the tendering, it's a services on continuous services that we'd like to get, maybe for a long term, or a contract that must be signed for a year or 5 years. I think so. And again, it depends. I think in the Navy, it's when we bought ships, we requested for tenders, but we did not ask for quotations. But when we buy small things like cleaning products, then we request quotes. Thank you.
Well done, well done, well done. All right, thank you for those contributions. Thank you, Job and Evangelista. Sorry, forgive me if I mispronounce your name. So the CIPS way is more inclined to what Evangelista was talking about. So the RFQ is issued to the suppliers for smaller items. Why is it so? It's because the RFQ always goes to a known number of suppliers. The invitation to tender is something usually that you go with to the open market. Now, you need to understand, Job, the kind of legislative framework that you have in your company, number one, and number two, if you are a public procurement buyer, you should also understand what the rules of your government are, okay? We live in South Africa, and the South African rules, depending on, sorry, I was just trying to get my tea, so I'm sorted. So depending on which schedule the entity is, okay? Now, entities like South African Airways, Eskom, I think the Post Office are Schedule 2 companies. Those ones, their threshold for tenders, in fact, the maximum they can do for tenders is I think the threshold is 30,000 rand. From 30,000 rand, I'm not sure what the upper limit. Now, depending on policy, you can get exemption to go out on a tender for a bit more than 30,000 rand. But for Schedule 3A organizations in South Africa, tenders must start for all transactions that are above 2,000 rand, okay? So you can do an RFQ for 2,000 rand, you must be able to test the market going up, all right. Now, the distinction between the two is that the invitation to tender is a process which is used for more complex transactions, and usually they are high value transactions that need to be evaluated on all the levels of evaluation. Okay, you evaluate it on quality, price, technical capability, delivery lead times, and so on. An RFQ, normally you only evaluate it based on price. Okay, so you send it to 3 suppliers or 4 suppliers, and the quality, who have already proven quality records, and then you only evaluate it based on price. Okay, now here is an important leg here. The other documents that you must develop are conditional contract terms and conditions. Okay, now there are 2 types of terms of a contract. The first ones are express terms. You should remember this as well, ladies and gentlemen, which are anything that is specifically written into the contract. So when you express those terms in a contract, that is on the hard copy, they are called express terms. The second one is the implied terms. Now, implied terms of a contract are linked to legislation. Here is the point, ladies and gentlemen. You all as buyers or procurement practitioners must know, especially if you're working in the public sector, you must understand the laws or legislation or regulations that govern procurement in your sector. There is no excuse of not knowing. Ignorance of the law is not a credible excuse that you can give for doing something wrong. Are we together? All right, so express terms and implied terms. So express terms are those terms that are part of the contract, they are written down. Implied terms are by virtue of legislation, regulation, even, I must say, common law, all right? Even common law. Common law terms, they may not be codified, but if they are in the common law, then you must ensure that you comply to those. They become implied terms in a contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Supplier selection is the next one. Now, supplier selection, the biggest criteria that you use for supplier selection is the Carter's tenses. That's the evaluation criteria that you use to determine which suppliers you're going to work with. Then you issue the invitation to tender or the RFQ. Then you do the tender, evaluation, and then you award the contract. You do warehousing, contract review, supplier relationship management, and finally asset management. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the distinct steps. Now, when you look at the post, I see Evangelista's hand is up. Do you want to say something, Evangelista?
Sorry, Charles, for being a nuisance, but I just wanted to ask the when you're done with acquiring the not the services, but let's say we procuring a product, at the last stage, are we not supposed to be when you get rid of it, there is a stage where you when it's no longer in use, is disposal.
Yes.
And we're supposed to be putting it maybe because I don't know, can we put it here? Or disposal is not part of a cycle, of a procurement cycle?
It is, it's very important. It's a very important part, ladies and gentlemen. Disposal. In fact, what CIPS have introduced is what is called a closed loop logistics, okay? It is closed loop logistics, where when you start thinking about what you need to procure, you are already thinking about how you will eventually get that item back to its original manufacturer for disposal. That concept becomes very critical when you are in nuclear procurement. If any one of you have been involved in nuclear procurement, the disposal of nuclear reactors and nuclear cells that are used for enriching uranium is very, very delicate, and only the original equipment manufacturers know how to dispose of them. So you need to understand how the product is going to be discarded at the end of its shelf life, okay? Because part of the total cost of ownership, ladies and gentlemen, is disposal. And if you did not take that into account at the time that you were putting a contract in place, it might cost you a lot to just get that thing disposed of, because it may be required to be, you may need to dig a trench of, I don't know how many meters in the ground for you to bury that thing, and so on. So you need the disposal. That's a very good question. There was another hand that was raised. Can Job, your hand is up as well.
Yes, sir.
I'll deal with these questions, ladies and gentlemen, and then after that, keep your questions until Q&A session, okay? Job, please go for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the explanation, quite well. Sir, I just wanted to understand, quite, as like you said, this procurement method is actually different in depending on what industry you are in, because I have seen like most of the mining have actually like kind of combined. I'm talking about specifically a invitation for tender and RFQ. So we actually like from our side we have actually omitted, like we don't have invitation for tender, but we have RFQ. The only difference is here that it's only the difference that is that it's only the delegation of authority that's differentiate whether you should have a short contract or long-term contracts, or depending on the package of the value. Actually, let's say I can have an RFQ, but for a $50 million, and the only difference is that it's only depend on the delegation of authority. Is that there's maybe a level of authority saying that, okay, from maybe I can give you an example, the HOD can only approve up to a 5 million. Then from there, maybe an ESCO committee members up to 20 million. Then from there, the board approve from 50. So we just, is it wrong to go with the routine of just in an RFQ instead of having both part? Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Job. No, that's absolutely fine. If that's what your process says, that all your transaction will go through RFQ, that is absolutely fine. Job, sorry if I didn't make that clear earlier, but you can go through the RFQ process if that is what your policy says. You can go through RFQ process. Okay. And normally, I'm sure what you do is you do pre-qualify suppliers in advance, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that you can do. So you pre-qualify the supplier in advance, so you know what their quality capabilities are and all those things. Then you just do an RFQ, and the only thing that you evaluate is the cost, and that's absolutely fine, Job. So thanks for that clarity. It was important that you said it now before we proceed.
Thank you.
So let's go to the next one. Okay, so the post-contract, one of the things that you need to remember, ladies and gentlemen, is that you need to manage both the pre-contract and post-contract award stages very, very accurately and very correctly, because they have very serious implication on the buying organization if they are not managed properly. All right. The next one is just very short. I think it's just one slide because it's a repetition. It just talks about the key stages of the sourcing process. So what I did is I just put what I see as the key process of the sourcing process for you to take into account. The first one is the defining of need. Now, this is where you develop the specification for what will be sourced and consider what the buying organization needs from the supplier. Then the creation of contract terms, developing terms and conditions and other legal requirements and of bidders. These elements set out the terms that the supplier will agree whether they enter into a contract with the buying organization. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, you need to have your terms of contract already set up at the beginning of the process. You don't somewhat once you receive the tenders, they are coming in, and then you start putting your contracts in place to suit another supplier. It's always good to have the pack ready so that suppliers, even when they're bidding, they know what contracts they'll be entering in. Then the next one is supplier selection. Okay, you will find a suitable supplier, and then contract award. Once all of the bids have been received, the proposals are evaluated and scored against weighted criteria. Now, again, criteria must be developed at the beginning. All these are part of remember the sourcing part is the very first stages, the pre-contract award stages of the process is what is referring to as the sourcing phase of the procurement cycle, okay? Then contract and supply management, this is where you evaluate and monitor suppliers and their performance against that contract. These are the key stages of this whole process. Now, the next one talks about electronic systems that you can use. Electronic systems can be used at the different stages of sourcing. The very first one is the E. At the requisition phase, you've got the E requisition. Now, the E just stands for electronic. It's no magic, it's electronic. So electronic requisitioning is the use of technology to raise a requisition. So you can use an E requisition. Then you can also use an e-catalog. This is up-to-date display of suppliers' product ranges available on a website or internet. Buyers may refer to e-catalogs to help source the need. Okay, you can save procurement professionals a lot of time if you have these electronic catalogs. Then you have e-ordering, where you use electronic systems to place orders. And those of you who have the Mrp systems, the Mrp systems normally will notify you of the requirements of the next orders that you need to place. Then you have e-sourcing. Now, e-sourcing is where you have to develop the electronic specifications, electronic negotiation, basically where you negotiate via emails and do reverse auction and e-auction. You know the difference between the reverse auction and the e-auction. Reverse auction, it's the buying organization who is running the auction, and the price goes in reverse. The normal auction is the selling organization that is running the auction, and the price goes up. So one goes in reverse, the other one goes up. So that's why the one is called reverse, and so on. And then e-payment technologies. This is where you use things like bank transfers, debit orders, electronic payments, and so on, in order for you to do the payment transactions. All right, now electronic procurements or e-procurement uses the same processes as the CIPS procurement cycle, but it includes the use of technology rather than manuals. Okay. The next chapter is, or rather the last chapter in chapter 2, is the relationship between achieving compliance with process and the achievement of outcomes. So let's go through these very quickly, and then we're going to go through some fun of questions and answers. You guys are excellent, and thank you for all the questions you're asking and all the contributions. So feel free. You all have very unique experiences that you can share with everybody else. Benefits of, what did I say here? It's covered. Oh, of processes. The processes, number one, why do we need processes? We're talking about compliance and achieving results for procurement. Processes are there, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure transparency and compliance with the procurement to the system, all right? Transparency and compliance. It helps to instruct buyers on what to do to ensure that the tenders and quotations are evaluated fairly. Otherwise, you know, it is going to be subjective kind of evaluation. It reduces the risk by providing guidelines for decision making. It advises buyers how to conduct conduct themselves when representing the organization. Now, part of what the processes have is a code of ethics, which we will, or a conflict of interest, a framework, which we'll talk about later. Or they can be used to help procurement professionals. Please mute your microphone. I think somebody is, yeah, thank you. It can be used to help procurement professionals identify the type of suppliers. Now, yeah, we'll come to the question later, ladies and gentlemen. This is very interesting. I want you to stay very close and pay attention to this, because there's a question that I'd like to ask you. We normally ask this question to our students to help them prepare. And sometimes they miss out on the importance of compliance. The world has been trained that compliance is a headache. Just if I can ask, don't raise your hand, but how many of you think that the traffic cop who is manning a roadblock on the road when you are on your way to work or on your way home is an inconvenience? Okay, you don't have to answer, but did somebody say something? Let me see. Me. All right, I won't say who said me, but really, that's how we've been trained to think, that when somebody is enforcing compliance, it is an inconvenience. So when we ask students and this question in their mock test, we ask them about the issue of compliance. They go ahead hammering why compliance, it was wasting time, it is what and what. And yet compliance is what puts the organization in the limelight. You become a preferred buyer. If everybody knows that you are an organization that complies to your own processes and laws and regulations, then you become a preferred buyer. Everybody wants to do business with you guys. So it's important that we take compliance in the right framework. When they ask you about compliance in the exam, don't think about the policeman who is trying to force you to do things that you don't want. Think about a policeman who is helpful to get you to the right place and to be safe. So that is what the role of compliance. So these are the benefits of compliance, the processes. In fact, compliance helps you to stay out of jail. Processes relating to ethics protect the organization by educating the procurement team in what to be aware of, what poor practices would represent themselves, and what situations they could find themselves in. So when you embrace your processes, guys, and you understand so don't give a hard time to your compliance team when they come to review your contracts or your auditors. Achieving compliance with process contributes to the achievement of outcomes, okay? So when we comply, we achieve outcomes, the outcomes that we are trying to do. It reduces operational risk. Like I said, undertaking activities in line with organizational strategy. When processes are complied with, it will result in added value when we comply to processes. Not complying with the process, on the other hand, results in an organization experiencing issues such as this. Number one, unethical behavior. I did a research one time in my life. I used to be a head of compliance at some organization at some point. And I did a research on compliance, and it was very amazing. Not in South Africa, but in the US, they found that 1 out of every 6 people is thinking criminal thoughts of how they can defraud the organization. 1 out of 6 has got criminal tendencies. And you can imagine that if people were left to their own vices to create their own framework of compliance, what would happen? That 6th person, every time they'll find a loophole where they can exploit the organization. So unethical behavior will become rife. Unsuitable suppliers will be brought in. Why? Because the buyer who brought them in was not ethical in the way they did it. Products shortages, damage to reputation, legal actions, and so on. So it becomes unbearable compliance to process. Let's go to questions and answers, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end. So thank you. You can unmute yourself and let's have a conversation. Number one, discuss the added value provided by the key stages of the sourcing process. Now, the reason I asked you this question is every time you go through the procurement cycle, you need to think about what are the value add that procurement can add. From 1 to 13, you know, there are 13 of them. What is the value add that you can add in procurement? Let me just have a look at the question and answers here. Okay. Thank you, Eva. You simplified my life right now. And Ninkele Chauke, well done. Thank you for telling us this. It says 1 million for RFQs in South Africa. Well done. Thank you for that. Is there anybody else? Anonymous. How best can we explain ways in which developing an accurate specification can add value for buying organization? Developing, yeah. So when you develop an, I think I've asked you something like that. Haven't I? Didn't we do that? Okay, let's answer that. Well done, Anonymous. So let's deal with that question. Developing a specification can add value. Think about the kind of problems a bad specification can bring to an organization. Number one, rework. And what comes with rework? If you are not going to develop the right specification from the onset, the chances that the suppliers are going to produce something wrong are very high, and you will be accountable because you gave them the wrong specification anyway. So procurement adds value by asking the right question. Now, you may not be the custodian of the or the technical spec. You may not be an engineer, but you can ask the right questions. As part of your training, we train you on value engineering analysis. Now, that is a process. Although it's an engineering on its own, it's a field on its own, which you can learn as part of your, but we give you enough information in value engineering analysis to help you learn how to break down unnecessary components out of a specification. Ask those probing questions to the engineer so that whoever is developing the specification can ensure that the specification that goes to the supplier is the right one, so that when the supplier delivers the goods and services, there is no rework, because rework costs money directly and also in time and resources. Okay, I hope I answered you correct. You got the answer, Anonymous. Let's go back to our slide. Now, let me just put all this because my animation didn't work correctly. So the first part is we were supposed to discuss. Now, discuss means consider something by writing about it from different points of view. Okay, compare with, argue, or evaluate. Now, those are different. Discuss, you must write about it from a different point of view. Okay, discuss. Now we are discussing the added value provided at different stages. Now I wrote a couple of them. At understanding the needs stage, what is the added value? Ensure quality standards are met, reduces need for records due to lack of information or misrepresentation. This is in fact, the other one that Anonymous asked is, you can include it here. You ensure that there are no reworks by having the right specification developed. Market option, what can you do? Research which method, make or buy, it will achieve the lowest cost. What value do you add here? You achieve the lowest cost, depending on the choice of whether you want to make or buy. Make or buy depends on the competency. There's one in your book, please look at it. The competency of a buying organization, whether it can manufacture that thing in-house or it should outsource it. All right. And so on. Developing a strategy and plan. What value add can you have here? You save time and ensures conformance by using suppliers that fit with the organization's strategy. Next question, outline the potential impact of complex compliance requirements on the achievement of positive outcomes in the sourcing process. Now here again, sometimes we have complex compliance requirements. However, we are not against the compliance requirements. The only thing is that what impact will they have? We will comply to them, but what impact will they have? So here we go. So we need to give the main features. The first thing that you say is that organizational focuses on process compliance can become rigid, inflexible, and inward focused. Okay, they tend to become resistant to change and unable to adapt to the challenges of changing competitive initiatives and customer demands. I've written a whole number of answers here for you. If you have any questions, please put them up. I put some more input here. It's quite a long, winded answer here. Let's go to chapter 3. How are we doing on time? Okay, let me just see. All right, we are still in business. Good. Let's carry on to chapter 3. Do you have any questions? Let me just quickly go to the question and answer session. Anonymous, did I answer you? Are you okay? Did you get the answer there? Development value. All right, let's carry on. The key aspects of the organizational infrastructure that shape the scope of procurement and supply chain functions. They're going to be explaining the key aspects of the corporate governance of procurement and supply chain function, analyze the impact of organizational policies and procedures on procurement, explain the different structures of a procurement or supply chain function, and explain the common IT systems that can be used by the procurement function. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. The first one, the aspects of the corporate governance of a procurement or supply chain function. Now, when you talk about corporate governance, ladies and gentlemen, there are rules, policies, procedures, policies and processes and structures. Okay? Rules, policies, processes, structures. Because if you do not do these, oops, I'm clicking the wrong thing here. I'm supposed to click this. If you do not do this, what does this sound like? It's just something that I help students remember, to help them remember all the 4 elements that make up corporate governance. Rest in perfect procurement pieces. RIPPS. It's not rest in peace, but the thing is, if you don't remember, if you do not have these things, your organization will sink. Okay, remember, a company is a juristic person, it can die as well. Without corporate governance, ladies and gentlemen, your company is heading somewhere. So RPPS is the acronym that will help you remember. It's the rules, policies, processes, and structures by which organizations are operated, controlled, regulated to ensure that they adhere to acceptable ethical standards. Okay, what are ethics? These are the measures of what is good and what is right to be done. Good practices, laws, and regulations. Now, within the corporate governance framework, a large component of it is the conflict of interest procedure. Now, a conflict of interest occurs when a person's involvement within an organization includes multiple opposing interests that could influence their decisions. If a supplier offers a buyer hospitality, that could result in a conflict of interest. If a buyer has a partner or a family member who works for a supplying organization, that is a conflict of interest. Now, conflict of interest may be represented in 2 ways. You have actual conflict and you have perceived. Both of them must be managed, ladies and gentlemen. Actual conflicts are those that occur when a procurement practitioner has to make a decision that may affect them personally. If it's perceived, then a procurement professional has private interests that could affect a decision-making process. And I should add here that if a procurement practitioner has interests, or they may not even have those interests, that but individuals around them perceive, if they were to be found out, they could be seen as being unfair. Okay, and I want you to see as we go along that a conflict of interest is not wrong at all. So what we encourage you to do is to disclose all these types of conflicts of interest. It is not a crime for you to have a relative who is on the other side of the organization, who is in the supplier organization, but you must disclose it and manage that conflict properly. Now, one of the other methods or other ways of perceived conflicts, ladies and gentlemen, is where you have a classmate, for example, and many of us, you can see that many of us have got colleagues that we worked with, or even neighbors that we stay close to that work for other companies. You know, though that could be a perceived conflict of interest, and especially depending on how sensitive the transaction is. I always encourage people or buyers to disclose that kind of level of conflict, and then the manager will make a decision how they're going to manage it. Okay, so I will repeat it, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing wrong having a conflict of interest, but you must disclose it. Here are the questions that you must ask yourself. Will I gain financially in addition to my salary? Do I have any personal relationships with colleagues or suppliers? All these become, if the answers are yes to this, you have a conflict and it must be disclosed. Am I doing an identical role for a competitor? It is a conflict. It must be disclosed. Should I disclose any of my concerns? You cannot never over disclose. So be quick to disclose. And this is how they are managed. Firstly, it's disclosure. Okay, you disclose the potential conflict of interest to the organization. This is the first step. And although it does not remedy the problem, it is an important step in maintaining ethical behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, let me advise you that every time you have in this scenario, disclose. Remember the 4D model: disclose, then distance. If the manager suggests that the individual has disclosed a conflict, does not have direct input with the contract, then the individual should distance himself. Okay, once you disclose, you are at the mercy of your manager. The manager can say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, you disclose. I mean, you distance yourself. Then if the procurement professional cannot distance themselves from the deal, then they should delegate any tasks to a colleague who has no conflict of interest with the supplier. So here it goes. If they are, say, for example, I'm evaluating a supplier, I'm the head of a team, I should probably do the final signature on that. Normally evaluation, it's a team, okay? But I'm the head, and one of my friends, excuse me, one of my friends is sitting on the other side, is part of the supplier organization. And if I cannot distance myself for one reason or another, then I can delegate somebody else to, and delegate it to not your junior, okay? Delegate it to a person who is at the same level with you or your senior, so that they themselves can review that process. Once they sign it off, then you can carry on with the process, okay? You can now do the reports, do the contracting, and so on. You don't have to you distance yourself completely. If the contract is critical to the organization and the conflict of interest is certain, the procurement profession should disassociate themselves from the deal to ensure complete objectivity in the contracting process. Ladies and gentlemen, remember the 4 Ds of managing or addressing a potential conflict of interest. All right. The next one is, sorry, where are we now? Okay. 3.2, analyzing the impact of organizational policies and procedures on procurement. Okay, now let me just see what's on top here. There's aspects to be included in the procedures for procurement and supply chain. Number 1, responsibilities within procurement. Here is, and I think somebody talked about delegation of authority. I can't remember whether it's Eve or Job. One of you guys spoke about delegation of authority, and this is what you guys were referring to. Authority to accept and process tenders. You need to understand who has the authority to do what, okay? Authority to do what? I always say that in procurement, ladies and gentlemen, we are like in the army. You do not operate without the ranking, okay? They have to put a rank on your shoulder and say, off this rank signifies that Miss Mr. Job, you can sign for $50 million worth of the contract. If a person gives you the authority to do so verbally, without putting the ranks on your shoulder, through a letter of delegation or through a written official document, do not overstep your mark, because you'll be breaking the rules of your own procurement organization. Okay? And in procurement, I always tell my students, when you make decisions in procurement, don't use your heart, use your head. Because if it's somebody that you respect and you say, no, Mr. So-and-so will not backtrack on me, or they won't do this. If you don't use your head, if 1 plus 1 is not 2, do not do it. Okay? And then you have to have a delegated authority which is being given to you. Authority to make decision must be given to you. Regulations relating to competition must be included in your policy. Competition in South Africa, there is the Competitions Commission. In fact, there is a Competitions Act. Okay, there is a Competitions Act that talks about competition. It talks about cartels, majors, and so on, and levels of delegated authority and responsibilities, reporting structures, who reports to who. And preferably, you should not report to more than 2 people. You must report to 1, unless you are in a matrix organization that we'll talk about later when we deal with structures. But then those responsibilities must be defined when you work in cross-functional teams. Responsibilities for stages of the sourcing process must be clear in the procurement process. Invoicing, clearing, and payment. Now, you guys who are in procurement, one of you will may be asked to develop a procurement process. Remember to have all these elements in your document. You must include who has the authority to accept and process orders, who has authority to make decisions, and the guys, your IT department that runs your enterprise resource planning system, which is most companies use SAP in Africa, wherever you are, SAP or Oracle, or yeah, those are the 2 that I know of. I'm not sure if there's any others. There should be others, but I've not used them. Okay, SAP. SAP will show you conflicting roles. Okay, you need to check. You need to ask your IT partner to show you, especially if you are the manager, which we are training you guys to be managers of procurement. Ask who in my procurement department has conflicting roles. Who has the role to accept and process orders? Who has the role to raise requisition? Who has the roles to clear and make payments? You must have that, because if you have anybody who has all these roles under their profile in the SAP system, you are setting them up to commit fraud, because they can generate a PR, raise a PO, and clear the payment, and it might go into their friend's account. So you need to make sure that those are checked. What are some other carrying on regulations? This must cover anti-competitive behavior relating to competition. Now, like I said, most countries, they've got the competitions law. I remember one time, I did tell you about my experience as a head of compliance, where we met with counterparts from the UK, from the United Kingdom government, where South Africa was sharing notes on anti-competitive behavior. So there's a global network to avoid price fixing and getting rid of cartels and so on. So your policies must include anti-competitive behavior and must maintain value thresholds for compulsory competitive bidding. Now, what that means is if you must say at 1 million, somebody, is it, who was it, Chauke? Somebody gave us a value threshold for South Africa, and thanks for that. And those policies and procedures must tell you what is the amount where you must go out for competitive bidding to the open market. All right. The main policies covering procedures to reduce the risk of unfair competitions are outlined in this table. So you've got, I've put them in a table. They were in the slide as well. Delegation Levels of delegation of authority must be included. Responsibilities for the stages of the sourcing. We've talked about those. Let's look at the use of procurement policies, procedures, strategies, and procurement manuals. I think I've only got one slide here. So procurement manuals can be created from the organization's procedures. They enable the buyers to undertake their roles effectively. So procurement policies commonly include what we talked about, competition, ethics, and so on. And policies are likely to be stored electronically, and they'll be on the organization's intranet. All right. What are some of the changes in strategy? Where procurement strategies are affected by a significant event, they may need to be a change. All right. In such instances, strategy changes rapidly to react to a situation that has presented itself to an organization. Change can also be incremental. So you've got rapid change or incremental change. And accordingly, change will affect policies and strategies. They can change. They are not cast in concrete. Most organizations even have provisions for ongoing changes to policies, so that if they discover something new in the process of executing procurement, which they are failing to go through because of there's no policy framework that allows for it, then they have a process of creating an amendment to the policy, which can be utilized. And when the policy is revised, eventually that amendment becomes part of the standard policy. Okay. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of policies? They are right here. They provide guidance, give continuity. Disadvantages, they remove innovations, they may restrict supplier base, and so on. You will read this for yourself. Let's go to 3.3. I know I am fast, but keep up, ladies and gentlemen. Just relax and enjoy the flight. Examining the different structures, and this is where we talk about the structures of supply chain. I beg your pardon, not sure why I was kept writing all on all these, but it is supposed to be of the supply chain function. Okay, now there are three basic structures of the supply chain. Number one, it's a centralized structure. Number two, decentralized or devolved. Okay. And then the mixed or hybrid, which is a combination of the centralized and decentralized structures. So these are the three types of structures that you can have within a procurement organization. Now, this table shows you, as somebody did ask on the chart, what are the advantages and disadvantages? There are a few advantages and disadvantages of all these structures that are shown on here, but it suffices to say that when you have a devolved structure, you have a responsibility of procurement with individuals in different parts of the organization. Okay. When it is centralized, then the vast majority of purchasing is done from a central place that is centralized. And then hybrid is a mix of centralized and devolved. Let me introduce you to the hybrid structures. The first hybrid structure that you have is called the consortium. Now, this is where organizations with the same needs collaborate for their mutual benefit. They come together, they bundle the volumes so that they can get economies of scale. Then you have shared services, which is also another hybrid. Then you've got lead buyer structures and outsourcing. We'll go through each one of them briefly. I told you about the consortium structure. The lead buyer structure occurs when an organization or individual takes the responsibility for procurement of a specific product. Okay, it's got its disadvantages and advantages. Then shared services, this is the form of centralized procurement structure. It occurs when an organization centralizes its support functions such as HR or ICT. Shared services are very common across the world. Now, outsourcing is a very interesting one, and I've asked you a question on this, which we're going to discuss now. When an external provider carries out a service that had previously been carried out in-house by an organization's own resource, that is outsourcing. Now, I want you to pay attention to this, ladies and gentlemen, because some students find themselves referring when they award a contract to a supplier, they say, I've outsourced it. What is the difference when you just award a contract to a supplier versus outsourcing a service? What is the difference? Well, what is unique about outsourcing? Why is it referred to as a structure of procurement? Should I tell you? Or somebody wants to try? Okay, let me go for it. Time is up with us. Here is the point, ladies and gentlemen. You need to remember that outsourced functions are those functions that which an organization has capability to do in-house. They were done in-house. It were previously carried out in-house, but then for reasons of advantage, which I'll show you now, the organization decides to outsource them, to give them to a third party on a contract. Okay. When you go out on tender, the normal contracting process, there is normally no capability to do those things inside. They're not part of your business and so on. And you find that our departments, procurements, have been casualties of outsourcing. I know that there are big organizations today in South Africa that specialize just in doing procurement for these large organizations. They give them responsibility to do procurement for them, and they shrink the procurement teams in-house to a very small, maybe one person who just looks after, manages the relationships with these outsourced individuals. Okay. Okay, what are some of the advantages of outsourcing? Of course, cost reduction. One of the biggest disadvantage of outsourcing is that the chances of losing in-house capability is high. Okay, and you become open to loss of intellectual property. All right, so but you can go through these advantages and disadvantages in your own time. Sorry, I will take it out of full presentation because I cannot see what is happening here. My slide, these things are not minimizing. I don't know how to do them. Let me try to do that. It's fine. Okay, are you okay with this format? Can you still see it? Hi guys.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's carry on. We are carrying on to talk about the different structures. Now, the other structure that we deal with, we're dealing with the hybrid type of structures, and in the hybrid structures, there is usually the use of cross-functional team members, and the cross-functional team members requires the building of rapport. All right, so procurement functions will interact with other functions. It is therefore important that procurement builds close, harmonious relationship, which is rapport with other functions and with external suppliers and other stakeholders. The need for customer service as well, it contributes to retaining business, developing a good reputation and organizational success. Good customer service can be achieved by ensuring several basic ways. All right. In order for you to strengthen your ability to network with other departments, you need to be able to answer phones and respond to emails. Don't have a reputation of not responding to emails. Okay. Do not make false promises. Do what you say you will do. Deliver good and bad news honestly. Encourage feedback and so on. So customer service ensures that both internal and external customers are satisfied. All right, that is 3.3. Let's go to 3.4, which is about IT systems, and it is a fairly short chapter as well. Then we'll do some questions and answers. Then we'll go to the very last one, and then we will close. If we have time, we'll go to the stakeholders, but if we don't, we will leave. I'll share my slides with you, then you can study them yourselves. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So the next one we're looking at is the IT systems that you find in that can be used in procurement and supply functions. Okay, so the first IT system is the electronic Mrp system. Okay, we talked about this Mrp system already, which is, we said, is uses base information to calculate how much of each component needs to be ordered. Now, the Mrp system, like I said to you, ladies and gentlemen, it is based on the information that you put in. Okay, it relies on the correct base of information that you enter. It is used a lot in like automotive industry or manufacturing industry, where you know exactly the number of components that are required in a particular vehicle. So what the Mrp system does is it looks at what you've got in the warehousing module of your enterprise resource planning system. It looks at your procurement module on what is on order, and it calculates the difference and tells you whether you're going to have excess stock or you will have a shortage. If it's a shortage, it will help you generate requests for you to go and procure additional items. Then the next one that you have is the just-in-time system. Now, this is a method of having inventory arrive at the point where it is needed. Okay, you don't put inventory in store, you bring it to where it is needed. Now, the advantage of this is that it reduces waste substantially. The suppliers work to specifically times to make sure that the production line never stops. The next one is the Kanban system. Now, Kanban has been very popular in the automotive industry. It is linked to continuous change and aims to define and improve work systems. Okay, this theory is about maintaining acceptable levels of inventories. Now, of course, you will notice that this Kanban system was started by the Japanese. All right, then we talk about the Erp system. Now, this is the master of all systems, which is the IT system that coordinates and integrates business processes. You have all the manufacturing modules, logistics, supply chain, HR, and all of them feeding into them. And the Mrp system can consolidate the reports and integrate them into a management system to be able to present to you how your organization looks in terms of its inventory, finance, and everything else that you need. Okay, now it's time for us to go through a question and answer. The question I asked you, ladies and gentlemen, is a procurement consortium is a group of separate organizations that combine together for the purpose of procuring goods and services. Describe 3 disadvantages for an organization of operating within a procurement consortium. And then describe 2 advantages for an organization in having an outsourced procurement function. First, let me go to the Q&A and see if there's anybody who has asked a question. I think we have dealt with all these. All right, let's see the chat. I think it's because we outsource skills we lack in. Yeah, that's correct. Oh, it was just a comment from Marseille. Well done, Marseille. That is a good comment. Well, you outsource the the things that, yeah, lack of skills is one of the reasons why you outsource, but usually there is a cost benefit analysis that is done before a whole full outsourcing is done. And skills normally is not the best reason. Companies outsource because they find that it will be cheaper for another organization to do it, to do the to manufacture or to procure for them. For example, if we're outsourcing procurement, you might have a buying organization, but if you have a team that procures for the mining sector, you will realize that when those guys start procuring for you, the economies of scale with them is going to be higher than you as an individual mine, okay? Skills, of course, is one of them, because sometimes you might have those conglomerates that do that do procurement for other organizations. They have specialized individuals who are specialized in particular sectors of procurement, okay? Yeah, so that's a good response. I think it's because we outsource skills we lack in. Yeah, it is one of the reasons. The biggest one, though, is cost driven. Most organizations outsource because they do a cost benefit analysis and they see that outsourcing is more beneficial to them than doing it themselves. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me just show you here what are some of the disadvantages for an organization. 3 disadvantages of an organization operating within the procurement consortium might be the following. Now, remember, I have missed out the other explanations that I gave to you about that you must start with an introduction, then the body, and all these are essay type questions. The body and then a conclusion. I'm just giving you the pointers that you need to put in the body, all right? Some of their disadvantages are the following. They are likely to be high costs associated with communication and coordinating staff development and policy development, okay? There is an issue of transparency between consortium members. Consortium buyers need full information about plans, processes, designs, and costs in order to make information procurement decisions. There may be lengthy negotiations, decision-making processes, and I've been through this consortium one, guys, and it fell flat on its face, because now the chief procurement officers from the different organizations started having egos, you know. I won't tell you which organization I worked for. So it was a long time ago. Okay, no, that's fine. Let's go to the next one. 3 disadvantages of an organization operating within, well, where are we? Procurement consortium. Did we write these ones? Advantages for an organization in having an outsourced procurement function. Did I give you the answers? Yes, there we go. Freeing up of resources, okay? 2 advantages for an outsourced procurement. You free up resources, the ability to draw on procurement, knowledge, expertise, like you said, who said, yes, Masikautu, that's a point number 2 here. The ability to draw on procurement knowledge, expertise, systems, and technology, which may not be available to an in-house procurement functions. The potential for the outsourced provision to aggregate demand, we talked about this, and refocusing the remaining procurement staff on other strategic areas, okay? So that is the question for, do we have another? No, let's go to the last one, which is chapter number 4. Okay, we have to do it in less than 30 minutes. We will manage. The first one is talking about, I'll try and do a presentation format as well. If it starts cluttering, I'll stop it. Classifying different economic and industrial sectors. So that's what we're going to talk about. Number 1, I want you to understand. So we're going to look at these economic and industrial sectors. Now, economic classification are based on how organization is funded, what its objectives are, and how wealthy it is, okay? Then you have private sector, public sector, and TSO, or not-for-profit. So based on its funding, objectives, and its wealth. Then the other one is industrial sector. Industrial sector. Okay, the types of organizations in terms of activities. So the other one is economic sector. Don't forget that, ladies and gentlemen. Economic sector, then industrial sector. So economic sector is based on its wealth, its its funding, objectives, and so on. Then the industrial is based on its activities. Number one, primary, we've got primary sectors. Number two, we've got secondary sectors. Number three, we've got tertiary sectors. Okay, so you must remember those. Next, let's look at analyze the impact of the public sector on procurement or supply chain roles. All right, I have to take out full. So public sector organizations, who owns these private sector organizations? So we're going to see a distinction between all of them, private, public, private, and third. Public sector organizations are owned and controlled by the government, okay, on behalf of the people. They are funded by taxpayers' money. What is their purpose? To provide a general public with services that are integral to their well-being and lifestyle. What is their objectives? Caring for its citizens, providing and improving services, enhancing facilities, integrating with communities, corporate social responsibilities. What kind of sectors are they in? The industrial sector they're in is tertiary, okay, because they provide a service. Let's go to the next one. Public sector procurement challenges. What kind of challenges do you experience as a buyer in the public sector? Number one, because they are funded by the citizens, the services needed to be fit for purpose and the public needs to be satisfied. You are spending public money. The budget available to the public sector have to be carefully managed, and often there is not enough money to supply the ideal service to meet the objectives. So procurement functions within these sectors, therefore, they face challenges of keeping facilities available to the public at an acceptable standard and within the agreed budgets. You have a complex of stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, if you work for the public sector. The community, all right? The organizations, the general public, civil society, business, and so on. You've got a whole complex type of stakeholder analysis. And remember, all these stakeholders must be managed. Public sector organizations and regulations, there are specific regulations that apply to procurement in public sector. Every country has got its own regulations. Regulations have common themes normally. They normally deal with non-discrimination. They talk about free movement of goods, equality, transparency, and etc. Good ethical practice is very important in public sector. Countries have guidelines that cover the procedures and processes. You as how do you add value in procurement? In public sector organizations, you become the custodian of what the government requires all the private sector organizations to do in terms of their procurement, all right? You need to study every note that comes from the law. I know that in South Africa, there is an organization, I think it's called Nexus something, where you belong there, then you can specify, they'll send you all the changes in law that take place, and you are notified in relation to procurement, all right, so that you don't break the law. Remember, it is a common law theme that ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So when you are in procurement, you must understand what the law says about public procurement, okay? Let's go to the next slide. The next one is chapter 4.4, 4.3, making progress. Examine the impact of private sector. So we've dealt with public sector. Let's look at public sector. Oh, sorry, private sector. Very interesting. Who owns it? It's individuals. It's owned and funded by individuals. You can now contrast with private sector, with public sector, because public sector is owned by government for the people. And the purpose, what is the purpose for private sector? It's to make a profit, okay? That is why procurement becomes very critical. Yeah, objectives, they vary depending on organizations. To make a profit, it could be an objective. Increase market share could be another objective. Be the #1 site for all internet searches. Ensure actions are socially responsible, etc. These are the things that you do as an organization. I think you guys have heard about some organizations in the world that may not make a profit, but they will just want to increase market share in a certain product and then later on increase prices at a certain point. So you must understand what the main goal of your organization is. They do this by providing goods or services. So what sector do private sectors operate in? They can be primary, secondary, or tertiary, all right? Then the next one is, what kind of forms of private sector organizations do we have? You can have sole traders. These are formed by single entrepreneurs, for example, decorators or consultants. Then partnerships, they can be formed by 2 or more people or organizations, for example, a firm of consultants. And remember, a partnership has to have individuals. Once one of the partners leave, that partnership breaks, you have to have a new partnership set up, okay? And normally, in South Africa, the partnership agreement has to be drawn up by a competent legal firm. You just don't, meet somebody and say, yeah, you are in a partnership, you are in a contract, you are in a partnership contract. All right, large registered companies have shareholders who have limited liabilities. Now, I know that we are from different countries, ladies and gentlemen. I want to encourage you that follow the concept of, in fact, the legal framework of your own nation to understand how these country or companies are constituted, okay? Like, for example, in partnerships, there are some certain countries that put a cap to a number of people that can form a partnership. They'll say maybe 20 people or 20 firms. Other nations don't put that. So you need to be careful if you are learning this for the first time for you to be able to apply it, okay? So private limited companies, these are where shares are not widely traded. And then public limited companies, these shares are traded on the stock. Remember, public limited company is different from public sector. So if a company says it's a public company, it doesn't mean that it is owned by the state, okay? It means that it is owned by the public because shares are traded on the stock exchange and they are freely available to anybody. Okay, you must understand that, because some students make a mistake where they think when it's public company, it means that it's owned by the state. All right, so then regulations on the private sector side. Regulations on the private sector are not as strict or numerous as the ones in the public sector. They should still promote good practice within procurement, and many of the regulations for private sector procurement are set internally, and as a result, organizations may follow different regulations. Internal regulations are likely to be based on the CIPS Code of Conduct, which you should familiarize yourself with. The Code of Ethics, familiarize yourself with that. Anti-bribery, sustainability, environmental awareness, transparency, accountability. Why? Because companies want to be known as responsible citizens. Objectives of private sectors: #1, shareholder dividends is one of the reasons why private sectors shareholder value, to give dividends to the shareholders and to grow capital or equity for shareholders. They increase shareholder value. Shareholders have the following rights: right to influence company decisions and so on. What are some of the objectives of the private sector organizations? Corporate social responsibilities is one. Organizations must procure ethically and sustainably. How does CSR serve the interest of the firm? the law, regulations, and code of practice impose certain social responsibilities on organizations, and so you need to be socially responsible, okay? What are other regulations of the private sector procurement? There are 4 main areas in which the nation's government influence private sector organizations. The government influences the operations of organizations in laying down strict rules or restrictions on production and protection of the environment. Also, they impose taxes and so on. This one, we can skip it. Let's go to the importance and role of branding, which is very important in the private sector. When you are working for the private sector, the brand loyalty becomes extremely important, okay? So a brand function is to reflect values in a positive way to engage customers and entice them to buy a product or service. A strong brand identity adds value in the form of awareness, engagement of the people or the community, and different types of communication. I will just focus on what the procurement practitioner's role is. The procurement professionals, branding is important because branding may influence buyers and help them to make informed decisions. All right, so remember that. Let's go to the last chapter, which is examining the third sector. It's not many, I've got about 4 slides here, then we'll go to question and answers. The third sector, or not-for-profit sector, firstly, who operates it? It says here, charities have funders, not owners. Okay, it's important to remember this. Charities have funders and not owners. Then they are operated by corporations, trusts, or associations. They are funded by donations. Any surplus they may make are used to support their goals, hence referred to as not-for-profit. What is their purpose? To support and promote social, environmental, or cultural objectives of goods or do good. Their objectives depend on the nature of the third sector. Now, there are 2 major categories. The first one is charities, where most of them will fall under. Then you got buying groups or cooperatives. Now, these are the ones that they aim to help members. They offer members cost savings with variety of products by obtaining competitive pricing for members and getting them trade discounts. Now, what sector do third sector organizations fall under? They are in the tertiary sector. For example, charities such as CIPS, Greenpeace, Greenpeace guys, volunteer community organizations, cooperatives, trade unions, churches, professional boards, and so on. Those are all third sector organizations. Registered charities, they are normally funded by donations from the public, from businesses, and sometimes from government. So their conduct is regulated. Now, in South Africa, you have these registered charities. I know that even certain naming of companies have been reserved for, like council. You can't use the word council unless you are a registered charity in South Africa. So if you want to name your company and end in council, they won't allow you to name it like that. All right. So because those councils are usually registered charities who benefit from public funds, and the government usually supports them. Now, they are highly, highly regulated because they are using public funds, and they are regulated by an independent body in some countries that aims to ensure that good conduct of all registered charities is maintained. Such independent bodies ensure that they are registered correctly. There are some charities that are fly by nights, and you have to be careful about which charity you engage with. Okay, ideally, procurement practitioners in charities will be MCIPs, like you guys. Okay, you are accredited, you ensure that money is spent effectively and the best value for money is achieved. Third sector organization may not have official procurement regulations that are required. They are required to work, but they must have good practices which should be exercised at all times. Large organizations will have their own procurement procedures. Documentation is the key to transparency in TSOs. Don't do anything on the, like my friends in the manufacturing industry would say, you write it on the back of the cigarette box. You don't do that in the third sector, because your transparency is key, because then your donors are going to run away from you, okay? Similarities with the private sector. Private sector aims to achieve best value for money, and also the third sector does. Conducting ethical procurement, promoting sustainability, all these are similarity. The differences are that suppliers might offer something for nothing or reduce prices because they want to help the cause. Gifts and hospitality is allowed, but they should be documented and verified by ensuring donors aren't looking to influence decisions. And remember, these gifts and hospitalities are meant for the third sector, okay? They accept gifts, donations, and hospitalities. Why? Because ultimately, if you allow them to go play golf, it's not the trustees that are coming to play golf. They'll get members or their beneficiaries to go play golf on that day. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've got 15 minutes. Let's do the last round of questions. I'll look at my chart now. LexisNexis, thank you. Talia, well done. This LexisNexis, if you subscribe to it, they'll send you notices of what has changed in law so that you are not ignorant of the law. Well done, Talia. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me see if there's a question here. No question. Let's go to the questions I've prepared for you. You are welcome to unmute if you want to participate. What are the key differences between the public and the private sector? What are the key differences? And I think I must have missed out. What are the five or three? Yes, it is three. The three key differences between the private and public sector. So that is how that question should read. Does anybody wants to have a go? Public and private sector. I've got the three differences that I wrote. And again, ladies and gentlemen, what are the three key differences between public and private sector? When you answer, and I still need to submit some exam tips on this topic a little later, but here goes. These questions, as a general rule, unless you've been told to list, don't list, use paragraph, assume it is an essay. Start with an introduction, introduce the key concept that they've talked to you about, and then you can go to answer the question that has been given. Also pay attention to the marks that have been allocated. Okay, if this question has been given 25 marks, then you should know that you are dealing with a question that is potentially going to take you about 4 written A4 size pages completely to be able to explain the whole thing that they are asking you about. I've given you some of these in summary, very summarized format, and for you just to have a gist of what we are talking about. So private sector, public sector organizations, and remember, here's another point I wanted to say to you. When you're asked to talk about differences, then you must talk about one line, a set of differences in the same paragraph, okay? So for example, this one, which is talking about, you see in the same paragraph, I've spoken about public sector, and in the very same paragraph, I start to talk about private sectors, okay? So that the difference is comparable. It is seen in the same paragraph. I've had students in the past where they would write this item up. They're talking about ownership by members of the public, okay? Then they talk about private sector being owned by private individuals somewhere else at the bottom of the answer. Now, you don't see where that ownership is being compared. You have to talk about them, contrast them in the same paragraph so that the examiner can see that you are talking about the same thing. Okay. So that is the answer there. And how does the way the public sector is funded have an impact on procurement? Public sector is funded by the government through taxation, which is collected from individuals and corporate. Public sector buyers are subject to a high level of accountability because the public sector is funded by the people it serves, and so on. The next one is, and I want to spend the last 5 minutes here, then I will open it up and I'll hand over to the moderator. Okay. Before you do that, remember to do your pause. Okay, at the bottom of your screen, there's a polling there that you can do. There are a couple of questions that you should answer before you leave. Now, let me go to this question, and you will find it. You may find it in your exam. So they're asking you about a regulation. Okay, identify regulation that apply in any 3 particular circumstances of procurement process. All right, any regulations. Now, you know that CIPS normally puts regulations that are applicable in the UK, Wales, and usually around the English law side. If you remember those and you're able to articulate them, good enough. Hold them or put them down there and explain them or identify them according to what has been asked. Remember, you are being trained for the world. You are being trained to take on the world, that you can take on a job in New Zealand, the UK, Netherlands, some of you who are still young and below 45. So that is why this qualification is so good, because it's global, okay? However, if you know of local legislation in your own country that applies to the question that you have been given, in South Africa, I have put the equivalent here of the Equality Act. It is exactly the same. They call it the Equality Act 2010 for the UK. In South Africa, it's called Equality Act number 4 of 2000. This is the same very act that talks about non-discrimination, no harassment, promotion of equality, elimination of unfair discrimination, prevention and prohibiting hate speech, and providing matters connected therewith. So that applies in the procurement process. It's a regulation that applies in the procurement process. Another point is, be careful not to use acronyms, okay? For those of you, my friends who are in South Africa, when you talk about triple BEE, do you know that somebody sitting in Uganda who might be part of this might not know, or even the examiner who is sitting in the UK who is going to be marking your exams may not know what triple BEE is. But they may even know it, but they would expect you as a way of answering questions, you do define what this thing called BEE is before you use abbreviations to it. Broad-based Black economic empowerment, and then you must do that. And put a thorough explanation. You will be given and credited marks for use of legislation that is applicable to your own country. Okay, remember, these guys who mark your exams are international people. Let me see, how can an effective procurement and supply chain management help a charity meet its main objectives? Yes, we talked about this, Mercy, if I can call you Mercy, if you allow me to. This, an effective procurement and supply chain management, remember, third sector is about deriving value from the donations that are contributed. There are various ways. Number one, by ensuring that you have value for money, you procure at the best prices, okay? And that requires you to negotiate prices properly. And you need to be able to if you are procuring goods and services, allow competition, because competition creates better pricing, all right? Then it will also allow you I can see a lot of hands coming up. Guys, I'll come to you just now. Give me a moment. Yeah. So excellent procurement, if you have negotiations and then a great reputation, do not do fraud. Comply to processes and procedures. Compliance is everything in third sector organizations, because if they hear that there is fraud, nobody wants to give money to anybody who is fraudulent. Okay. Kanyisile, please go ahead. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am actually do we have any hands that are up? Yes. Kanyisile's hand was up, but she's not saying it.